Good evening and good morning, everyone. My name is Asef Bayat, Professor of Sociology at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. And with me here is Linda Herrera, who is also at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign College of Education. Welcome, everyone, to this seminar, which is devoted to introducing the book Global Middle East into the 21st century, which has been published by the University of California Press and edited by myself and Linda Herrera. We are especially delighted and really honored to have a fabulous group of authors, contributors to this volume who are actually here with us, who have agreed to speak. Unfortunately, there were others contributors who could not make it, but we are happy that we have 14 of us here. Now, the way we will proceed with the webinar is as follows. I will start with making a short remark about the idea of the book, and then Linda will continue to elaborate on the themes of this volume. And then I will invite the contributors to make their remarks. Now, the initiative for this volume really came from the series on Global Square, which is being edited by Professor Matthew Gottman, anthropologist from Brown University, and Professor Jeff Lesser, a historian from the University of Emory. And the series really is devoted to producing edited volumes on the globality of the regions of the world. So far, they have published the first volume on global Latin America, and the second is on global Africa, and we are the third volume on global Middle East. Now, when Professor Gottman and Professor Lesser proposed to us to work on this volume and edit and produce this book, we were, of course, very enthusiastic to do it, despite the fact that we had our own projects at hand at the time, because we thought that such a volume really, in the context of the Middle East, was really missing. And we were very much welcoming to the idea. But our thinking from the very start was how to make this book somewhat special, innovative, engaging, and even somewhat playful. And you have actually noticed the titles of your essays. We have changed it. Almost every title has been changed. And somewhat playful, despite the fact that the volume is really dealing with very kind of serious issues. Now, the fact that Linda and I are partners and live in the same place, in the same house, it made it somewhat logistically easier for us to constantly talk about it and brainstorm on breakfast when we were cooking or taking a walk. On how to sort of curate and conceptualize, this volume, and what themes to cover, and who to write, and how to write it, and so on. We also disagreed a lot, and I tell you, there were a lot of yelling and shouting and screaming, but we agreed specifically one thing especially, and that was the format. And so we wanted to produce a volume that contained essays that were short, about 4,000 to 5,000 words, that were accessible, that were jargon-free and with minimal sort of notes, but written by probably the best possible scholars on the subjects. In other words, to produce a book that had chapters informed by rigorous scholarship, but one that also could be understandable or an average undergraduate able to understand it and really enjoy reading it. So that has been really the idea, and we hope that we have been able to accomplish this. But in terms of substance, this book really aims to display the kind of global dimension of life in the MENA region, its social, its political, cultural, intellectual, scientific, artistic, environmental, and so on domains. Both, of course, global in and global out. Global in the sense that how to show how the region has been somewhat affected, been influenced, certain aspect of its life has been shaped by processes and forces outside of the region, but at the same time, how certain forces and processes and ideas in the region have affected and influenced or shaped life outside. Conceptually, we have tried to capture this very complex sort of dynamics of globality of the Middle East in terms of effects, for instance, geopolitical effects that certainly has affected and shaped tremendously our region. Then in terms of circulation or the flow of, for instance, belief systems, ideas, art forms, foods. And then in terms of exchange and transmutation of, for instance, scientific knowledge, how we give and take in terms of also translation, or in terms of addition of particular cultural registers that moves from one place to another, especially food, for instance, how it gets indigenized, but also, or finally, in terms of the worldliness, in terms of borderlessness, the situation in which one belongs or navigates, different cultures and geographies. So I now hand over to Linda to kind of more elaborate on the themes of the volume.
Welcome, everybody. Asef and I want to first give a big shout out of thanks to the College of Education, especially the Department of Education Policy Organization. I'm so supportive in helping us with all of the logistics and setting this up, and also the Department of Sociology, which has co-sponsored the event. All of the authors who are here, wonderful, and we also want to recognize the authors who weren't able to make it, and I'll go through who they are. Now, as Asef said, there are certain things that we wanted this book to achieve. One was the pedagogic function. And by that, we mean we wanted this to be a text that people could not only teach, but people could take on their own and really learn from. A volume where chapters were written with clarity and with all of the craft that our writers and academics have. And we wanted a book that combined kind of the critical social sciences with the humanities. So this book very much brings these two together. There's a mix of styles, from historical style to essay to more social science, but all of them are really written with a lot of clarity for the purpose of being, I would say, inclusive, and for really being able to reach a global readership. Any one of these chapters, out of the context of the book, can stand on its own and can be of real value and pleasure to the reader. So we really were thinking about making a book that people could connect to, not only in the classroom, but could enjoy in its own right. So we were really thinking to have a book that was not only related to the 21st century, even though 21st century is in the title, but that would, we hope, will stand the test of time. And we've had such wonderful contributors. So I just want to briefly let you know what's in the book, and you're going to hear from some of the authors in a moment. So of course we have our introduction, and then we start with Nations Without Borders. Have this wonderful essay by Ebrahim Moosa about the idea of a monotheistic God, because that is one of the very powerful ideas that came from the region and spread around the world and still has resonance around the world. And Robert Morrison then wrote something about the history of the Islamic sciences or Arabic sciences, and he talks about what to call them. Fatemeh will speak about her chapter on Rumi, the bridge builder, and we're happy to also have Hamid Dabashi, who's going to talk about On Nations Without Borders, which inspired us with this section title. Section 3 on Home in the World combines 3 essays. We were very happy that the estate of Edward Said gave us permission to reprint his beautiful essay on reflections on exile. Amro will speak about his piece on Mo Salah, a moral somebody, puts him in a very global perspectives. And then Khaled's unique and wonderful chapter on Gamal Abdel Nasser, also with a global lens. The 4th section combines food, film, fashion, and music. And you're going to hear today in fact, everyone in this section is here today. You're going to hear Sami Zubaida speak about circuits of food and cuisine, Karam on film with pictures in motion.
Karam is not here.
Oh, Cameron is not here. Oh, I'm sorry. Michael Frishkopf on musical journeys, fascinating look at Arabic music and how it's been influenced and influenced world music. And then Ted Swedenburg on the Kufiyya. After that, we move to the geopolitics of goods. Jeannie Sowers on water, on the issue of water. Timothy Mitchell on the cycle of oil and arms, which comes from a book that he wrote. It's an excerpt. Ahmed will speak about cotton, and Laleh, Khalili on the ports of the Persian Gulf. And then we go into human flows, the movements of people in different ways. Waleed in his beautiful piece on tourism and touring exotic lands. Ahmed, who looks at labor and outsiders of the oil states. And then John Tofik Karam on the Levant in Latin America. And I'm not saying much about those because these authors are here and will be able to speak to these points. And finally, we look at politics and movements, the way politics and movements in the region have inspired or influenced or been influenced by some kind of global movement. So Asef has written a very nice piece on global tahrir, how tahrir became a symbol globally. Olivier Roy, who is not here, on the whole process of Islamizing radicalism. Alana Feldman has written about the global movement for Palestine, and Mary Allen has a long history of doing work on human rights and asks the questions, is this something indigenous or imperial? And then when I had to decide on my topic, I wanted to go to Salah Ben Habib, who was a very well-known philosopher from Turkey, and talk to her about her really impressive body of work and her biography on cosmopolitanism and the Middle East. For those of you who maybe aren't very familiar with all these topics, I think these can be very incisive introductions to the topics. But what I like about these chapters is even for very seasoned scholars, I think every chapter would have something to offer. So you can read each one at different levels and get something different out of it. So on that note, I would like to hand it back over to Asef, and then we will start hearing from our wonderful contributors.
Thank you, Linda. As I mentioned at the beginning, we are really lucky and honored that 12 contributors of the volume are here with us, and they have agreed to make their remarks about the book and about the theme of their contribution. So I will actually start inviting them one by one, as I said, according to the table, the order of the table of the contents. So can I ask Fatemeh? So Fatemeh Keshavarz is a professor of literature at the University of Maryland.
Yes, that's correct. And Roshan Institute for Persian Studies.
Nice.
So it's really good to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us. And thank you so much for the opportunity to write for this volume. It was one of the funnest things I wrote. So I had written on Rumi before, and one of the challenges I always faced was that either you have these studies that are fully focused on which manuscript was produced where, and is this towering mystical figure and who wasn't really into poetry but had to write poetry because he had all those inner experiences. And I always wanted to say, come on, just look at the kid in him. Look at the way he's whirling. Look at the way that not only he is whirling in life, that he's whirling with poetry. What he does, for example, to the form of ghazal, which usually is like 12 to 13, 14 lines focused on topics of love and emotion, and often not in an order, in any narrative order. And he just kind of blows that open, and you can get any kinds of lengths. You can get sometimes thematic focus in the poetry, and basically turns it into one of his, the playful things that he's done in his life. And it's fascinating that, for Persian speakers, if you say Maulana, which means our master, as you all know, everybody knows who we're talking about. Or if you said Masnavi, the form of Masnavi, that it refers to his Masnavi. Or if you said Divan Kabir, that people think of him. So he's on one level with these actual speakers of the language, he's grown so wide and has taken in philosophy and Quranic literature and even references to, stories coming from all kinds of folk traditions. And kind of, it's hard to see how he's impacting the lives of the people who read his stuff and people who were around him. So I happened to actually have come back from India when this request came. And we had been in the city, we had been in Mahmudabad to meet with the Raja of Mahmudabad to get permission to work with Persian manuscripts that they had there. And there I saw Rumi in action. I saw him speaking Persian to us. Here's this, man in his 60s, mostly grown up in India, but has traveled worldly, speaking Persian to us, Arabic to some guests who come in, English to everybody else, Hindi to people in local around him, and French to others. And not only that, we met his two young sons who also went through the same kind of intertextual engagement and intersectional, really, with life. And so we had some of the most fascinating conversations about Rumi. And that's what I wanted really to bring out in my short piece. I wanted to say that this is a Silk Road, this poetry, the Silk Road of the imagination that connects these Persian-speaking world, which is why when Rumi's father arrives in Konya, there is a place for him because the culture, the language has room for him to move around. And I just wanted that to be accessible to someone who's thinking only of we know what when we think about the Middle East. So on that note, I also loved the cover. Thank you so much for making it very lively and 21st century-ish, but real also. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fatemeh, really, for being so concise. Appreciate that. Now, Hamid. Hamid Dabashi is a professor of comparative literature and Iranian studies at the University of Columbia, or Columbia University in New York. Hamid.
Okay. Thank you, Asef. Thank you, Linda, for having me. To be perfectly honest, first and foremost, I accepted to join this because I love Asef. When he asks me to do something, I can't say no. And then when we had Linda also joining, I missed them both. I remember their days at Columbia. I have great admiration for their scholarship. And so it was a pleasure for me to join. Give me a reason constantly to write to Asef and Linda, so it has that context. Then when the table of content appeared, I realized there are a number of other colleagues whom I deeply admire, and also former students, both a student of mine like Kamran and Columbia students like Laleh Khalili, who had joined and written these utterly brilliant pieces, and I felt that I'm home. Now, as to the substance of what I wrote, I had just written a book, Persophilia, which is kind of a fusion of my version of Orientalism and cultural imperialism, with a decidedly Habermas twist of transnational public sphere. And Asef and Linda had seen it. And initially, when we began the conversation, it was really to do a small version of that Persophilia. But then I had written 2 additional pieces. One was Iran Without Borders, and one short essay, introduction, called Palestine Without Borders. So our conversation started going. I received wonderful comments from them. And I began in their company and their comments. I felt I could go beyond what I had done in Persophilia and Iran Without Culture, Without Borders, Palestine Without Borders. And they gave me the space, the impetus, the confidence, actually, short as this essay is, for me to go on a limb on certain direction of the theoretical speculation that I had not done in those previous work. And eventually, when I began to read other colleagues joining the same volume, that this is really a moment of epistemic shift. Asef's own work, Linda's own work, they're always at the cusp of these moments of epistemic shifts that happen in the discipline. And that in their envisioning this volume, in their curating this volume, they were master conductors of an orchestra that they had envisioned and heard in their own minds. And then they were just telling us they had detected, each one of us are players of certain instrument, and we play that instrument well, but their art and their vision of how these instruments should come together and produce a symphony is entirely theirs. And it is only now that I'm beginning to read other colleagues' pieces next to mine that their vision of what they were thinking, not just in historical moments, 21st century as opposed to 20th century, but more in thematic and epistemological sense, that allowed me to bring Matisse and Kiarostami in same sort of theoretical speculation, was also helpful for me to be able to talk about these issues. So in short, just to cut to the chase, because as I said, I'm the director of undergraduate studies in my department, and about 5 minutes before 2, I have to rush. We have an open house today. I apologize in advance to all friends and colleagues if I rush before we're done. In short, our individual pieces, as they are, for what they are, is one thing, but the gestalt view that Asef and Linda have created in this volume is something beyond the specific contributions that we have made, both in their introductions and also in curating us to go into certain directions. Certainly speaking from myself, they're guiding me and encouraging me to go into certain directions that I happily obliged. But it is only now that in the context of their book, I see where they were going. To me, this collaborative, cooperative volume is a signpost of a major epistemic shift in the field that will have its impact. I hope people will read it, not just for the specific pieces and what they are said, but actually for the collective vision that it generates. I'm grateful and honored to have been part of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hamid, specifically, talking to the volume as a whole. I appreciate that. Now, Dr. Amro Ali, sociologist, is a fellow in the Forum for Trans-Regional Studies in Berlin. Yeah, Amro.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Asef, for having me. And I would want to thank Linda and Asef for inviting me to contribute to this book project with a superb team of scholars. That is a great honor. And Asef and Linda, I have to say, you are both academic marriage goals for everyone. So keep up the excellent work that you do together. And because what you do is very inspiring. I have to say that I was attracted to the book project because it was Linda who asked me, and I'm always inspired by Linda, just as I am with Asef, and Linda has also mentored me in the past. And I like the idea that it was an easily accessible style, and it's written really for a larger, wider audience beyond the academic sphere. And it would also cover the holistically the region and key themes that might be overlooked. And I'm also honored to be sandwiched in a table of contents between Edward Said and Khaled Fahmy. So the inspiration for the chapter came from a Madame Master article that I wrote a few years ago, which looked at Mohammed Salah and the phenomenon that he has become in Egypt and abroad. And the idea was in this chapter, to flesh out key themes that I discussed in the original article. Now, here in Alexandria, where I'm based, and sometimes when I go up by train to Cairo, and when I randomly see a group of children playing football on the street, I ask them, which one of you is Mohammed Salah? Or which one of you is representing Mohammed Salah? And they always all go, Ana, me. And then they start arguing, saying, I'm Mohammed Salah because I'm the oldest. No, I'm Salah because I'm the tallest. I'm the boy here. My hair looks like Mohammed Salah. I'm the one wearing his shirt. The other ones are not wearing his shirt. Everyone is Mohammed Salah, basically. You can see I stir trouble. But the question I would like to, that I want to ask, why Mohammed Salah? Why him? Why now? What is particularly amazing beyond the football success? Because success in the sports is not enough to explain the phenomenon. So why him and why not others? How does an individual, for example, go on a commercial for for Egyptians to stop doing drugs, and the drug helpline shoots up by 400%, simply because Salah appeared in it? Why would someone, and many say this, they would say they hate celebrity worship, football, and famous figures, but they make an exception for Salah. So success is not enough to explain a lot of things. We've got to delve deeper. And I flesh out 3 concepts in the chapter, and that is somebodiness, and the first one. And the idea of somebodiness I first discovered while watching the funeral live of Muhammad Ali, the boxer. And the Reverend Dr. Kevin Cosby of Louisville drew on African-American theological discourse to describe a concept that I felt that we could relate to here in the region. And his exact words were, before James Brown said, I'm black and I'm proud, Ali said, I'm black and I'm pretty. Black and pretty were an oxymoron. Blacks did not say pretty, but Muhammad Ali said, I'm proud, I'm pretty, I'm glad of who I am. And when he said that, that infused in African Americans a sense of somebodiness. And this word somebodiness, I did not know about this term before, but when I looked into it, I found that it went deeper into African American history, and it has a very sophisticated use in discourse in the US. And it was Martin Luther King Jr. who initially coined the term somebodiness. He believed that without a deep sense of somebodiness, a person would be incapable of rising to full maturity. So I've readapted that for the Mo Salah and Egyptian and the global context, and to try and understand the struggle for dignity amongst Arabs and Muslims, and the idea of self-acceptance, self-definition, and self-determination. The other theme, the second theme, is the politics of juxtaposition, because Muhammad Salah does not discuss politics. And that ironically makes him political, because he becomes like an open canvas, a slate where everyone can project their politics, their faith, their hopes, their fears onto him. And he becomes appropriated by everybody. And the idea of the politics of juxtaposition is that because when the establishment is polluted, he looks like an immaculate figure. And so there's a very vivid contrast there, whether with the establishment or scandal-ridden European athletes. So he provides that canvas for people to latch onto. And finally, the secular sacred binary. So historically, sport was historically a religious endeavor. So in ancient Greece, you did sports in honor of Zeus, in Christianity and Islam, sporting activities were seen as strengthening the believer in for the sake of God. But in the modern era, the secular and the sacred have been broken, and sport has been elevated to a secular religion. So there's a tension between sports and faith that has been quite present in Muslim discourse. So Mo Salah sort of patches up the broken link between the sacred and the secular by even blaspheming against the secular by prostrating his forehead to the ground on an oval in Liverpool or elsewhere. Also, the Muslim athlete is nothing new. We know this. So we've seen this with Muhammad Ali, the boxer, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Mike Tyson, Zidane. They're treated as some sort of redemption of the Muslim world. The stellar Muslim athlete in the West has long represented this sort of redemption, and it can feel for many that the corruption, dysfunction, and poverty that characterizes Muslim societies can be redeemed, even temporarily, by an icon or a sporting event from time to time. And it's not always easy. Like Zidane it was a struggle to appropriate Zidane, because he came with a lot of contradictions like drinking, etc. But Mo Salah came with a different sort of with less contradictions, and so he was much more appealing to the wider region. And so finally, I would say that the chapter looks at that with these themes overall, and there's a positive. He promotes a positive unity rather than a negative unity against terrorism. And when people are devoid of compelling icons, he can signal new moral codes that may be lacking in people's lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate Amro. Khaled. Khaled Fahmy is a professor of modern Arabic studies at Cambridge University in Britain. Yeah, Khaled.
Thanks, Asef, and thanks, Linda, for the amazing opportunity. And it's a pleasure to be with you all. I just want to start my comments by something that Asef mentioned about titles, that all the titles are playful. Well, there are three exceptions. I think Ebrahim Moosa's title, God, and Ted's title, The Kufiyya, and mine, Gamal Abdel Nasser. No subtitles, nothing. It was very intimidating, and it still is very intimidating. I didn't know how to play with a character. I mean, Gamal Abdel Nasser is a serious character. He's not an easy person. And I just want to share with you 4 big questions that difficult questions. I don't think I resolved at all, but things that I continue to think about when dealing with such a huge figure as Nasser. The first is just the thing that I end the essay with. I end the essay with a question whether if one is to pose the question to Egyptians of naming Cairo airport after Nasser, what would happen? And I'm pondering and I'm hypothesizing that all hell will break loose. There's no consensus in Egypt about Nasser. It's a deeply contested figure. So whereas one can find, and I have, someone sent me a picture of someone in Argentina, young boy. I mean, he hadn't been born when Nasser died, with Nasser's name as a tattoo on his arm. But we have a metro station named after Nasser in Cairo. We cannot name a square after Nasser. We cannot name Cairo airport like Charles de Gaulle or Khomeini airport or Ben Gurion airport. We cannot name Cairo airport after Nasser because the legacy is contested. He's a deeply contested figure. So that's an opening, struggling point. The second is which moment to start with, which is the moment that encapsulates, if one were to write a biography, not a long period. I mean, I dealt with Muhammad Ali, who ruled for 50 years, Nasser much shorter, but in Egypt, of course, we have the famous movie Nasser 56. 56 is the moment of glory that encapsulates him and catapulted him to world fame. And for me, I think it's 67. Not because I think in the moment of defeat, I think his best traits, I think Egypt in 67, I think the best in Egypt can be modern Egypt, Egypt I know, can be witnessed between 67 and 73. I have goosebumps when I read about what happened in 9th and 10th of June of 67. Very controversial moment, very difficult to write about. I have tears when I read about Nasser's amazing energy to rebuild the armed forces and to not sign on the dotted line. I think this is his most glorious moment. Not to go to Washington and beg for redemption. I think this is, but again, you know, it was a catastrophic defeat that he was responsible for. So that's again some of the complexities of him. Thirdly, Nasser was also a huge global figure. So the question of writing a chapter or indeed a book, I mean, I should have started by saying that there are tons of books in Arabic and in English and in Egypt about Nasser, you know, but they are either in Egypt, they're either geographies or diatribes. We don't have a single critical biography of Nasser in Arabic. So it's very difficult, many years after his death, to still deal with him. And the fact that he's a global figure and a towering one at that, to then, to use a dualism, you know, the local and the global, how do you weave together the very rich legacy domestically, but also the enormous impact he had in the third world? And the last thing, last tension, you know, many of us in Egypt say that, you know, it's a peculiar republic that Nasser established, a Gumhuriya bila Gumhur, a republic without a public. I mean, a public that was disenfranchised somehow, but a public that is enormously for him. So Nasser had a huge popularity overseas and in the Arab world and also in Egypt, but somehow he did not trust people. And that's an amazing, you know, when people trusted him with their lives, with the when mothers would offer the toddlers to him, and he would accept this but not reciprocate by opening up the country. This is an amazing, you know, tension that makes the most dramatic of accounts. Of course, my chapter doesn't do justice to all of these questions. It's just a beginning. I mean, when Linda and Asef approached me, I jumped on the opportunity, knowing very well it would be very, very difficult to write. And it still is very difficult to write it, but I thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Khaled. And I'm sorry that, you know, we have kind of a short time for each contribution because they deserve to be elaborated so much. But because of the fact that we are kind of lucky to have so many of you, so 3 minutes is not really that much. The next is Sami Zubaida, who is known to everyone here. He's the Emeritus Professor of Politics and Sociology at Birkbeck College, University of London. Sami, please.
Well, just to say how happy I am to be associated with this wonderful book and with all the wonderful colleagues, with Asef and Linda, with whom I had happy association over the years, and it's a nice culmination of that to be part of this book alongside so many distinguished colleagues on such interesting subjects. Well, I've been working on Middle Eastern food, among other things, over the years, and I'm always intrigued to find traces of the Middle East in so many cultures and in Europe and in the East and in many places, which of course is now crystallized in the foodscapes of the globalized cities of the West and other places, in which we have the kebab shops on many streets and hummus in great variety of flavors on the shelves of supermarkets and the menus of many eateries and much else. Of course, the kind of repertoire of Middle Eastern food was, in the one hand, developed from the syntheses that were brought about by many empires over the long centuries of the history of the region, culminating in the Ottomans, the Persian, and the Mughal. And they carried the sort of Middle East has been the medium of carrying many food ingredients and cultures and methods from India and further east, and from Africa into the region itself, and then further on to Europe through Iberia and Sicily. And then there is the other movement which came from the Americas through Iberia into the Middle East and brought in what became essential ingredients in Middle East food culture, primarily the tomato. Can you imagine the Middle East or the Mediterranean without the tomato? The tomato and the pepper. Can you imagine India without chilies? And maize and all the other ingredients that have been so important in shaping Middle Eastern food. So then what we eat now is a product of all these syntheses, which in turn are being globalized through the processes of fast globalization in the modern world, and with the migrations and diasporas of populations from the Middle East into the West and in many other contexts. I want to just highlight one theme in my chapter, which is maybe intriguing, which is the question of the global Middle East in alcoholic drink. How alcohol had been such an important element, not only of the cultures of the region, but the way of the globalization of themes of alcohol. Beer, as we know, was original to Mesopotamian antiquity, and the domestication of the vine and production of wine is traced to the Caucasus and northern Iran. The Phoenicians are credited with taking the vine across the Mediterranean to what is now Marseille and the beginning of French wine culture. Paradoxically, the so-called Muslim lands hosted the invention of much in the technology and vocabulary of drink, as well as the rich culture and literature of wine, khamriyat. The word alcohol, as many of you know, is from alcohol, antimony. The word arak, which in Arabic means sweat, is a metaphor for the distillation of alcohol, which was invented in Abbasid Iraq. And from a period in the 14th century, the word arak became a designation of distilled spirit in many languages and contexts, from fermented mare's milk in Mongolia to distilled palm wine in India, drunk in the factories of the British East India Company and in the British and Dutch navies before the coming of rum and gin. Derivatives from arak persist in many languages today: raki, araki, rakia, in Turkey, the Balkans, Sudan, Indonesia. Mezza is an integral part of drinking cultures of the region. Overlapping repertoires crystallized in the modern drinking venues of Istanbul and other major cities of Anatolia and the Arab Levant. It is there that a sophisticated culture of what François Georgeon called savoir boire, knowing how to drink, developed from the middle of the 19th century, as well as the culture of nargila, what's now called shisha. it featured prominently. As we can see in the foodscapes of our cities, mezza has become a regular feature with innovations and has merged with new patterns of the restaurant meal with a variety of small plates replacing the three-course menu, bringing to the fore Middle East and Mediterranean patterns of eating and conviviality. It's truly global. And now we have nargila and shisha, so-called cafes on many street corners in our cities in the West. So here we are, the global Middle East in food and drink, and its contribution to the conviviality of the world through the cultures of alcohol. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sami. Really brilliant. And next is Michael Frishkopf, Professor of Music, University of Alberta. Michael, I cannot see your. Here is Michael.
I'm here.
You appeared.
Yeah,
hi, how are you?
Good,
Very
good.
well.
Yeah, thank you so much to you and to Linda for inviting me for this volume. It was really a lot of fun to write my chapter. In it, I sort of reflected on the way in which music in the region is connected to music of the world, and how music of the world is connected to music of the region, and how these regions really don't make any sense in the first place, particularly when you think about music, which is such a fluid cultural expression which transcends many boundaries, even the boundaries of language in many ways, although sometimes with a changed meaning. So I started looking really at my own life and how it intersected a lot of these patterns in history, not because I think I'm important, but just because it's what I know. And that's what made it kind of fun to write, to trace these connections and to see how they linked up in ways I hadn't really expected, then to do a little bit more research. I thought to enliven this, I don't know if you have time, but it's just a very short. It was very hard to write these stories because they're very nonlinear, they're very non-chronological, they're very densely woven together, they intersect in different ways, but I just thought I would pull out one strand and show it to you, if I may. So I'm just gonna go very quickly. In about 2000, I was asked to serve as a consultant for a lawyer representing Jay-Z, the famous rapper. And they say whether this clip is just Egyptian folklore or whether it's really something that could be copyrighted, because they were being sued. And I was surprised to find out that it's actually the introduction to a song from this film, which stars Abdel Halim Hafiz, called Fata Ahlami from 1957. Now, the interesting thing is that so he incorporated it in a song called Big Pimpin' in 1999. This was the basis for the lawsuit. What I discovered was that actually it had happened through the mediation of a very famous percussionist and really a keynotal figure in Middle Eastern music in the world, Hussam Ramzi, who sadly passed away about 1.5 years ago. This is the version that he had produced. Primarily, he produced CDs for a global audience of belly dancers, which is a whole other story in itself. How did belly dance become such a global phenomenon? And he became very, very famous through belly dance, but also performing with famous rock stars like Led Zeppelin. And eventually, we actually had him come to the University of Alberta and perform with us this Kulthum song. Anif Intizarik. So anyway, that's all I wanted to share, but just to say that these threads are very complex and densely interwoven, and it was really fascinating to have the opportunity to trace them. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Michael. This is wonderful. Thank you. And now we have our friend Ted Swedenburg, who's a professor of anthropology at the University of Arkansas. Ted.
Thank you. Let me adjust mine. Okay. So thanks to Asef and Linda. I had the pleasure of being their colleagues at American University of Cairo a long time ago. And I'm really thrilled to be with this very illustrious group of scholars and to be in a book with them. My subject is the Kufiya, and I'm very pleased that it is on the cover of the book on Edward Said's shoulders, illustrating its importance. So I'm gonna do something crazy. I'm gonna try to do a fast and dirty summary of my article. For Palestinians, the Kufiya is a key symbol of national identity and their struggle for national liberation, which has continued now, amazingly, for over a century. It is, at its basis, an item of headwear for men of the countryside in the Eastern Arab world. It emerged as a symbol of Palestinian, of liberation during the 1936-39 revolt, rebellion against British occupation and Zionist colonization. It was revived in the late 60s with the emergence of the armed Palestinian resistance. It continued to serve as an important emblem of struggle in the Palestinian Intifada, and it remains so today. In the 1960s, it was adopted by sympathizers with the Palestinian cause around the world, and it became a sartorial item of resistance worn by activists involved in all sorts of progressive movements. In the 80s, while still worn within the progressive movements, it was also adopted as hip urban wear by many young people. And Linda's, oh, there we go. In the wake of the US invasion of Iraq in the mid-aughts, it became for a period a fashion item taken up and adopted by many designers at the same time that it was embraced by city hipsters. And every time there's a chat, I can't advance.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I just can't advance the slides. So trying to keep within roughly 3 minutes. During these years, when it was very hip, many celebrities put it on in a variety of colors, wide variety of colors, including one of our favorite people, Meghan McCain. Meanwhile, a number of Israeli designers followed the lead of European and US designers and launched efforts to appropriate the kufiya in an effort, in most cases, to denude it of progressive political meaning. The kufiya has also, ever since the first Gulf War, and more vigorously since the launch of the global war on terror, been taken up by US veterans, really also by European veterans, and more recently by many in right-wing militias in the US, whose ranks include an important segment of war veterans. And it was there and noticed by people at the occupation of the Capitol on January 6th. And yet, with all these far-flung adoptions and adaptions and transformations, the kufiya remains an important figure of global solidarity with the Palestinians, and it remains dear to the hearts of Palestinians at home and the diaspora. And that's it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Ted. I mean, you said a lot in the course of these 3 minutes. Appreciate that. And can I ask Ahmed Shokr, who is a professor of history at Swarthmouth College in the US. Yeah, Ahmed.
Great, thank you, Asef and Linda, for this wonderful volume and for organizing this webinar. So my chapter contributes to our understanding of the global Middle East by telling the story of Egyptian cotton, which is something of a dying commodity today. The chapter is divided into 3 parts. First, I offer a brief history of how Egypt became a leading global producer of cotton in the 19th century. I highlight 2 major events that originated beyond Egyptian borders and that contributed to this transformation. The first is the American Civil War in the 1860s, and the second is the British occupation of Egypt in 1882. And then second, I moved to the present and follow Egyptian cotton from the fields where it's grown to the retailers and department stores where it is sold. Along the way, I explore some of the conflicts and contestations between growers, traders, state regulators, and manufacturers over how Egyptian cotton is produced and sold and who gets to reap its benefits and its profits. And then third, I offer some concluding thoughts about what it means to say the global Middle East and how the very brief history of Egyptian cotton that I present can help us to make sense of the category global. I emphasize that what I think is a genuinely global perspective does not simply add many national situations into a global whole. For me, the global is not a box that different localities and regions and nations simply exist inside. Rather, in its most constructive usage, I think the term global points to the processes themselves that link people and ideas and goods and institutions and natural environments across different spaces and how those processes get reconfigured over time. Now, in terms of pedagogy, I think this chapter and the volume at large can be useful in the classroom, inside and out of the classroom in a number of ways. First, it can be assigned in undergraduate classes that are introducing students to the study of the Middle East. I think this chapter can work well in first-year seminars, for example, or survey classes for students that are just beginning to learn about the history and politics of the region and who can use short and accessible chapters to guide them. Second, I think it could also be used in more thematic courses on globalization, on cross-border movements and flows, on global political economy, on commodity histories. I think one of the great virtues of this volume is that it explores the global Middle East through a whole range of different kinds of interconnections that link the region to the rest of the world. And so it offers students a wide range of examples of how the region has been constituted by movements and flows that don't obey any national or regional borders, and also how people in the Middle East have shaped ideas and processes and institutions that we consider global. And I also think this, this chapter and many chapters in the volume can have many uses outside of classrooms and outside of the academy as well. Especially because the chapters are short and accessible and very nicely written. So I'm excited to be part of this volume and excited to be here in this webinar with everybody, and I look forward to teaching you.
Thanks so much, Ahmed, for this very rich and concise contribution. I really appreciate it. It's wonderful to have your piece in the book. Next is, of course, Laleh Khalili, who was really a pleasure to work with because she was the first in everything. First to say yes, first to submit, first to edit. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Laleh is a professor of international politics at Queen Mary University in London. Yeah, Laleh, please.
Thank you very much, Asef and Linda. It was absolutely a pleasure to work with both of you, and my anal retentiveness and sort of being on email all the time led to me being very quick in responding to things. It is also an extraordinary pleasure to have all of the different friends and colleagues that are here and also in the volume. I just want to quickly, since I've only got 3 minutes, I want to point to why I chose the larger research project out of which this particular chapter arose. In a sense, when one looks at the history of maritime transportation in the Middle East more broadly, although in my chapter I focus on the Arabian Peninsula only, when one looks at that history, it seems that the entire scholarship on maritime transport is bifurcated into two. It's either older histories of seafaring, and sometimes very rarely coming even into the 20th century, usually stopping at the 19th century. There's a couple of exceptions. Johann Matthew's amazing amazing book on illicit transport in the Indian Ocean being one. And a second is a focus on much more recent, the sort of the mechanized ports, but often not by anthropologists or scholars of politics and sociology. So not looking at social relations, but rather looking at sort of the more engineering side or managerial side of it. And so what I really wanted to do in the larger project was to actually connect those two histories together and to also have a much more human kind of account of how the modern mechanized ports have arisen in the Arabian Peninsula. So that's the larger project. And what the chapter does essentially is looks at two different ports on the Arabian Peninsula and tries to explain the decline of one and the rise of the other. So Port of Aden, which I really wanted to go to, but unfortunately the war started and I had no way of going, was at one point the fourth largest, most important port for ship fueling behind New York, London, and Liverpool. And until 1967, when it was colonized by the British, it was constantly used by the British, in fact, precisely because they wanted to be able to have a coaling station for their colonial adventures and maritime colonial adventures across the oceans. They needed Aden. And of course, Aden has since then fallen, and of course, more dramatically in the war that Saudi Arabia and the Emirates have waged on it, has been decimated. To me, the history of the rise and fall of Aden was a very political history. It had very little to do with sort of the, of course, larger managerial or engineering things mattered, but it was a political history. The rise of Jebel Ali, which often appears on the top 10 list of largest container ports in the world, is also a very political story, although often people don't talk about it in that way. They talk about its efficiency, they talk about its productivity, they talk about how friendly to business it is. And so by trying to contrast, and I won't give away my argument so that you guys have a reason to read the chapter, by trying to contrast the fall of Aden and the rise of Jebel Ali, I try to talk about the specific colonial and post-colonial politics that has gone into shaping these ports across the Arabian Peninsula. I hope that I did it in 3 minutes. Thanks very much, Asef.
Oh my God, yeah, you did.
Linda,
you did.
and everyone.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Laleh. Really, it's a fascinating chapter. I really recommend everyone to read it carefully. And next, of course, is Waleed, Professor Waleed Hazbun, who is a professor of Middle Eastern Studies and Politics at the University of Alabama. Waleed.
Thanks. Yeah, it's great to be part of this project because of all these great scholars as well as friends, but also the framing of it very much fits with the way I thought about my own research about the politics of tourism, and it's a good opportunity to bring together a lot of my different works across different times and areas. My own chapter is called Touring Exotic Lands. It's a broad survey of the history, politics, and political economy of international tourism across the Middle East and North Africa since the late 19th century. The study and teaching of international tourism is important, I think, in part because by many accounts, it's one of the largest sectors of the global economy, but also that flows of people, capital, and images associated with tourism operate as, in some sense, as the leading edge of globalization, across eras. They connect people and places across the world within an integrated system that is defined by private firms, public policy, and consumer behaviors. And so it brings together all these different sort of aspects of political economy, cultural studies, and geography. So to teach about the Middle East, to teach about tourism in the Middle East is really about teaching about a global process. And that's how I see it. So just really briefly, I begin in the late 19th century with the British firm Thomas Cook & Son bringing visitors to Egypt and the Holy Land within the context of Western imperialism. And then in the mid to late 20th centuries, states across the region frequently use tourism to promote the so-called engine of economic development, and often as a tool for neoliberal economic policies. So I show how European, American, then later Asian, East European, and then also Middle Eastern tourists came to Mediterranean beaches, historic cities, ancient ruins, and so forth. I also trace very briefly the rise and fall of cross-border tourism flows associated with the US-backed Arab-Israeli peace process in the 1990s. And then most recently, look at how tourism economies have been sort of regionalized around the oil-rich Gulf states where global airline hubs have been built and have received massive numbers of international visitors, as well as send and receive regional Arab travelers and direct investment flows related to tourism and other related sectors. So we can kind of see this kind of the shift in political economy across the decades through the lens of tourism. And it's great to be between Laleh, Khalili and Ahmed Kanna, which I think look at other kind of related aspects of these processes. So, I mean, I kind of conclude the chapter by highlighting, in a sense, the political message, in the sense that patterns of tourism flows and tourism development often enable neoliberal processes of exclusion and produce patterns of increased social and economic partitions and fragmentations rather than openness and inclusion. So the idea is that tourism is a great lens to see all these different processes, but also, like at the bottom line, it really is a story about power and politics across the region.
Thank you, Waleed, again. So rich and concise, and we had a very clear now idea about your chapter. The next is Ahmed Kanna, who is a professor of anthropology at the University of the Pacific, on a very interesting really chapter on the Persian Gulf and migrant workers. Ahmed, please.
Thank you very much, Asef. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, just to echo what everyone else has said, it's really an honor to be part of this. I'm very happy to see some old friends and colleagues. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to participate in this excellent volume, which I also plan on teaching in my own classes and encouraging my colleagues to do so as well. So my chapter titled Outsiders of the Oil States focuses on basically on labor struggles, what I call class struggles, what can be called class struggles in the Arab Gulf region. And so where this work really is inspired by, all my work on the Gulf has been inspired by sort of reaction to images of the Gulf, you know, that you see all the time as a sort of exceptional, sensational, you know, a region that's just represented with skyscrapers and oil rigs, Navy ships, teapots and aircraft carriers, as the anthropologist Paul Dresch put it some decades ago. And so what I wanted to do was basically to subject those images to a critique, a class critique, basically. What I've been asking in my more recent work, and really all my work on the Gulf, is, you know, how is society reproduced, basically, and how are social relations, how are class relations reproduced? And what I found was fascinating and rather ignored in much of the sort of literature on the Gulf, whether scholarly or journalistic, was a small tradition, but an important tradition of indigenous critiques of capitalism. So I'm thinking here, of course, of the most famous example is Abdurrahman Munif's cycle of novels, Cities of Salt, which subjects the, you know, oil modernity in Saudi Arabia to ferocious critique, as I'm sure many members of this panel know. The subjects, for example, of Fred Holliday's classic book, Arabia Without Sultans, the Omani and the Southern Arabian sort of movements that were anti-capitalist and anti-colonial, and the Emirati scholar Abdel Khaliq Abdallah's mid-1980s dissertation on dependency theory and the United Arab Emirates, all of which were radical sort of alternative tradition of analyzing social processes and profit accumulation in the region. So through reading this material, I looked at some of the sort of more sensational aspects of the region, such as the demography. 90% are foreigners in some of the smaller Arab Gulf countries. and my timer is telling me to stop, so I'll wrap up very quickly. So basically, I'll look at sort of struggles from below by both Arab workers and foreign workers and other social movements from below, mostly looking at secondary literature. So this paper really talks about how these represent an alternative tradition of what modernity could mean, or a path not pursued, really, in the modern Arab Gulf region. So I'll stop there. Thanks very much.
Thanks again a lot, Ahmed, for this, again, rich and concise presentation of your chapter. It's really very interesting and very rich chapter. And the last but not least is a presentation by John Tofik Karam, our colleague here at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, on a very fascinating piece on the presence of Arabs in Latin America, their communities. John, please.
Thank you so much, Linda and Asef. Really, my deepest and sincerest gratitude for the honor of being part of this book. As Asef said, focusing on Latin America. So in a narrow sense, the main aim of the chapter that I wrote was to put Latin America on the map of the global Middle East. But Latin America is a perspective. It's an idea, as Walter Mignolo has argued. It's not an area. And so that being said, in a broader sense, the idea behind the chapter was to change the way that we think about a global map. I mean, to quote the former Minister of Foreign Relations in Brazil, Celso Amorim, means to go from Brasilia to Cairo. You don't have to pass through Paris. To put it in more, I guess, anthropological terms, I just shared my screen, so you could probably see this. I'm paraphrasing here, Arjun Appadurai, who raises this question now 2 decades ago. But I think it is still a pressing one, and one that guided sort of the logics of writing this chapter. How do others, in what we still take to be certain areas as we define them, see the rest of the world in regional terms? The little excerpt that I have, it's an article written originally by Philip Hitti, the quote-unquote father of Middle Eastern studies, based for decades at Princeton University. He wrote it originally in Arabic, and then it was translated by a colleague of his, also a former graduate of what became AUB, Arab Studies in the New World. And he speaks of ties between Arabic and Portuguese or Spanish. He concludes this article stating, "I hope that the brothers in Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico come to compete with their brothers in the North. We hope that those brothers try to found a chair for various professors of Arab and Islamic studies in the main universities of the area, of the countries where they settled." And so in this sense, I was torn. The chapter that I wrote, it goes through sort of political and economic and cultural visibility of Middle Easterners, overwhelmingly Lebanese, Palestinians, and Syrians. But I was doing so to really speak to the readership of this book, who are going to be, reading for the first time about the Middle East. They might think to themselves, well, really, what sort of presence, what sort of, who are these Arabs of Latin America, so to speak? And I wanted to impress upon the reader that one cannot really understand protectionist neoliberal models of the market, authoritarian or even redemocratization efforts, the increasingly targeting of diverse consumer markets, one can't understand these without really looking at Arabs in Latin America. One can't understand these currents in Latin America and beyond without looking at Arabs. So to really bring the reader that would be the student first thinking about what where do we look for the Middle East? We can look for it in Latin America, and it will change the way that we think about how others, in what we still take to be certain areas, as we define them, see the rest of the world in these regional terms. To quote again Arjun Padarad. Thank you so much again to my co-contributors and to Linda and Asef, really, for this honor to contribute to the book.
Thank you, John. It was really, again, fascinating chapter. So this actually brings to the end the presentations that we've had. I want to personally thank you, all of you, the presenters, our colleagues, and for your attendance and your contribution, not only to the book, but to this event, to this webinar.